follows any of us on Twitter knows that Steve and I, certainly engage in a lot of Twitter fights, but I have to say I've known him a long time, and we are really good buddies, so don't read anything into Twitter that you should. Yeah, and Steve is also going to be running the Ed Critical Q&A later on in the event. Greg is also going to be doing the Mets history panel later on, and I think Jason Fry in the back is going to be, is he still in the back? Jason's going to be moderating the Ron Darling Q&A as well. So everybody here is involved on a very high level, not only in their daily writing on the blogs and stuff like that, but it's a real community. And just by the sense of how many people are out here and came today despite the weather, I think is, to me, a huge reason of why this event has come to place, because of the loyalty, because of the commitment that these guys have made to bringing the Met fan their version of what happens in Metland every day. And I think it's a real debate around the world for being so responsible for this event today. I really appreciate it. Anybody have a question they want to ask before I start babbling on? Continue to babble on. Anybody have a question for the folks up here?
Anyone?
All right, I'm going to ask Matt Strong. Matt, all right? Turn on Matt. I'm going to ask Matt. Now, Matt, you probably are the most well-known Mets blogger out there. And I think that based on the amount of reads that you get, the amount of page views that you get, I think it's very, very easy to say that Mets blog is the #1 read Mets blog in the country. So, from my question is, what started you to start blogging about the Mets in particular, and did you ever think in a million years that it would get to this level?
No, and I think I started because of Brian Hope, who I know you remember back from Mets Inside Pitch, the magazine that converted online. He was doing a lot of work online. I think actually you did some stuff with him. He had left, and he was writing for the Star Ledger's Mets blog. It was sort of an inspiration. This is like 10 years ago. And when I was taking a digital media class in school, I kind of used him as a model. I was living in D.C., so I was out of market. And I think the genesis of the blog, and I still feel like it's my favorite compliment today, is when there's an out-of-market fan that utilizes the site as a way to sort of stay connected with the news cycle and kind of get the idea of what other fans are feeling and kind of keeps them connected to what's going on. Now, that seems commonplace today, but 10 years ago that was a lot more difficult. You couldn't get WFAN online, it wasn't that sort of way to stay connected. So that was really the origin of it. And then as the site grew, I kept writing it, and it's obviously changed over time, and all these guys have done a terrific job as well. I admire something about everybody here that which I did as well as all you guys. And I think collectively we do a tremendous job. I mean, I keep tabs on all the other teams and what they're doing, and nobody is supposed to think what we do collectively in the Mets blog.
Now, for Greg, I've interviewed Greg many times. Greg has edited my work very painstakingly. Greg, a lot of people here know you from the books, Happiness Recap, Faith and Fear of Flushing. But I think a lot of people also know you for the blog, Faith and Fear of Flushing, as well as with Jason Fry. And one thing I always take away from your blog is that it's long form, but it was like long form is like a new word, for people that are used to reading long form. But I think the tagline is for Met fans who like to read. And has that always been your style of writing? Always a quote-unquote long-form writer? Or was that just something that you dreamt up for the site itself?
I think the length of any given post is probably best measured by how much thought and care given the Mets on any given day. And since I have a reputation for writing long form issues, politely put it, I would say that we give a lot of thoughts to the Mets. We care a lot about the Mets. The blog was an outgrowth, really, simply two guys emailing each other for about 10 years. First we were on the AOL bulletin board, then we were emailing with some other people, and guys like Steve and Matt were inventing blogs, which came as shocking news to me. 05. And it was like, oh, we can do this and other people can read it, or at least, my wife, Jason's wife, will read it, and, maybe I'll like it. But I would say the thing that made the blog go is that it has something that we used to hear a lot more before there was as many outlets, which was, you guys are writing what we're thinking. And, when the only media available to the Mets fan was sort of one-sided, which was traditional. Which is, here's what happened in the game last night, or here's who might be traded, or here's a bit of one Mets and clubhouse gossip. That's all, stuff that we treat as cabinet as fans. But the fans were always sort of this blob of people in the stands or somewhere calling WFAN and making unreasonable trade demands. And it was never really understood that we're all actual individuals, and we all process the Mets in our own way. And I think that's why Flushing sort of struck a nerve, and I think that seems to extrapolate from there by some of the other blogs that come along, as well as all the social media that sort of help that feeling, and now it's not that way. We write long when we're compelled to, and we write short when we're disgusted, probably. Unless a pop fly is dropped 2 hours in the night, then we can go on all night. Thanks, Greg.
Corral, you were from OnFly.com. Now, I was first introduced to Corral because of his blog, and very professionally done, very well done, and I was struck by it because he was one of the first guys to do it. He was one of the first guys to have a Mets video blog, and I like to work in different platforms as well. I haven't had the guts yet to do it. But then again, you are the reigning Mets Police Smazzy Award for the best looking blogger. So, certainly is nominated again this year. So vote now. Go to MetsPolice.com. Corral, what got you started doing the video blog? What was that? What was the epiphany there? Said, oh, I'm going to start doing video as opposed to writing.
Yeah, well, just blogging in general, just like most of us, was just an outlet for me to talk about the Mets. And I think video, probably all of these guys sitting up here and others, had an impact on that, because I certainly can't write as well as Fred or Jason or others. And so I use video as a way to kind of stand out. There were a lot of more established blogs than me when I first started, and still are. And so video was just a way for me to just kind of stand out in the crowd.
Now, I'm going to have a follow-up question because you're going to talk as long as everybody else. So don't read into it, guys, if you got a follow-up question. Would you like to expand it to the point where you actually, like doing stand-up reporting, or is it something that this is your comfort zone, and this is what you want to do?
Yeah, no, I think this is my comfort zone. This is what I want to do. I could easily at some point today stand in the corner and take this out and do a quick 2-minute clip and have it up on YouTube in no time. So I kind of like to keep it loose and rough around the edges like that. I think my biggest challenge is getting more of you guys to be in front of the camera, quite frankly.
Everybody knows what an egomaniac I am, so anytime you want to tape an interview with me over. Mike Silva, the Weekend Watchdog on ESPN Long Island. Now, please repeat to the microphone what the
Call it 1071-96.9 Eastern Long Island. Championsradio.com if you want to listen to the
together from Mickey together many times. Haven't worked together for a long time, but Mike is not only well known as a blogger. Mike is obviously a radio host and has been doing it for a long time. A self-made radio host, and like myself, someone who is constantly begging our local radio stations to look for young talent, different talent, somebody other than, some of the guys that we listen to on a regular basis. Mike, what got you started adding the blogging to the radio and creating, the New York Baseball Talk podcast and kind of merging all that different stuff together?
Well, I didn't have cable when I was a kid. So I grew up in the 80s, no cable in Brooklyn where I was, so no internet, which I know there's some probably people in the audience can't imagine not getting their scores on their phones. So the fan, when it started, and overnight, guys like Steve Summers and Jody Mack, I'm sure you remember, when I had a curfew as a 12-year-old at 9 o'clock, you put your little Walkman on and you listen to the fan. And I always wanted to do it, and when I went to college, I chickened out. I said, I need to make money, I need to have a real job. So all those years I'm in sales and in the car, I'm listening to Mike and Chris, and then all of a sudden message boards and like Mark's site Gotham Baseball was on, and I started to compare what I was hearing on the radio to what I was reading, and I was like, there's something not right here, it's completely different. And I decided to take a shot. It was a local radio station that was broken time out in Babylon, and created New York Baseball Talk, and one of my first guests, and I didn't think I was going to get any guests, was the late Gary Carter. And I still remember, 2 minutes before I go on air, my phone rings with a private number, and I turned to the producer and said, this has got to be him, pick it up. And I kept Gary on for 25 minutes. I didn't want to let him get off because I didn't think I'd get another interview, until he said, you know what? My phone's dying, I have to go. So I took that as a cue that, you know what, I got to wrap this one up. But from that, to build an audience, I had to get into writing. It was a good outlet for me personally, meeting all these great people here. And I got to tell you, even if you do writing to 10 people, 15 people, 20 people, like Greg was saying, it is such a good mental exercise. It improves your vocabulary, your outlook. I've done sales presentations. I presented in front of senior management, and that's so different because my toughest critics have been people that I don't even know what they look like. They're anonymous commenters, which is fine, or Twitter and stuff like that. And for me, it was a labor of love. I was fortunate where I've been able to parlay it into some part-time work. Wish I could do more of it. Obviously, the business is rough in terms of making money. And I've had the opportunity to be with, now since August, ESPN Long Island's an affiliate, Champions Radio, doing 10 to 1, doing all sports. I wish I could have talked more baseball, but it's been Geno Smith, Rex Ryan, and the Giants since about August. I tried to get Terry Collins fired, it didn't work. I had a little rant on Saturday morning, I really tried. But, I know, it actually fooled me for a second.
That's my dad.
Does he know how to manage a bullpen better than Terry? I guess that's the long. I guess you don't need to do a follow-up because it's a long-winded answer to your question. No follow-up. There's no follow-up.
Now, where's Ed? Ed Lerner, where's Ed? Is Ed? All right, good. Ed's not here, so I can say our next blogger is a very beautiful Karen Cooper. Now, don't let her looks belie the fact that she is one of the toughest bloggers out there. She is, I made the mistake of the day Tom Glavine was inducted into the Hall of Fame, making the argument that Met fans should really appreciate Tom Glavine's career, as a Met, considering he was an all-star game twice. I don't want to open this up to the Tom Glavine conversation, but just to let you know, I was attacked by the sweet lady that you see before you. But in all honesty, Taryn, the blog, not only that you do now during this quarter is the Cultivate Personalities podcast, which is fantastic, but that's, your original blog now for a season, which is really your foray into the blogosphere. Talk about what made you start blogging and, kind of your journey to this point where you are now.
Okay, well, first I wanted to say that it was actually my summer family that you're thinking of. Gal for All Seasons is my current blog.
I'm sorry.
That's cool. But my summer family started out as, unlike most of the people sitting here, I was not one of the original, the original 6 bloggers. But I started out as a blog groupie when, I guess it was really, ironically, when the Red Sox won the World Series in 2004, I had a lot of friends who were Red Sox fans who were telling me about all these great blogs, and I found 2 blogs that I don't think exist, and they were co-Red Sox Mets blogs, like Misery Loves Company, that type of thing, or The Enemy of My Enemy is My Friend. And then from there, I started to find people like Greg and Jason, Steve Keen, and they, Greg and Jason, I often say that I aspire to be like them as a blogger, but I fail every single day. And yet I had the language of someone like Steve Keen that was really just a shoot from the hip. So what happened was I was a groupie and commenting on all these blogs. I said, well, I have enough content here that I can have my own blog, because I was basically writing them in the comment section. And that was what started my summer family, and it's fractured off into doing a podcast and writing for Kramer's Corner as part of a group, and now Gal for All Seasons.
Now, what I like about your blog, as opposed to some of the other blogs that the reason I wanted you on this panel, is that you don't get caught up. Even when you get mad at me when I write stuff that, is upsetting to you, you are very objective all the time about what's going on with the team. And there's not a lot of homerism in you, in the sense that, you're no evil, see no evil type of thing. And I think that's why I like your commentary so much about the Mets in general, because you're very fair.
Yeah, well, hey, thank you for that criticism. I try to be. I often say I don't like being right about this, but no, let's face it, I love being right about it. But I mean, you're absolutely right. I grew up in an era where it was, you're right, it wasn't about the homerism, it was about, let's kick some ass and take names later. And I try to, have that kind of attitude in my writing too. I think a lot of things, and Mike actually hit on a very good point, that a lot of the criticism that we get is from anonymous content, or anonymous commenters rather, who don't put a face to their name, and they'll hide behind their computer and not really come out of the shadows. It's cowardly, really, but we're out here, we're putting it. You have to have a thick skin for it. And I think a lot of that came from growing up basically at Shea Stadium in the 1980s.
Hi, Steve. How are you, buddy? Steve, what can I say? Now, Steve, you are another one of those bloggers that I love reading, because I never know what I'm going to read. Because on the one hand, Steve is Sandy Alderson's very good friend. Right? See? But on the other hand, Steve is not ever shy about criticizing ownership, or criticizing the manager, or criticizing the team when they don't play well. And that is, like Taryn, like almost everybody up here, that sense of, I'm a blogger and I'm a fan, but I'm not afraid to call, a spade, and say, hey, this is not good. The team is not playing well, and it's great to be optimistic, but at the same time, pointing out things need to be fixed. And I think has that always been easy for you when you started the blog?
Yeah, when I first started, there were really a lot of Met blogs out there. I got started doing this about maybe 13 years ago. And the inspiration I got is from a guy named Bill Simmons, who I guess you all know from ESPN. And Simmons used to do a thing called Digital City on AOL, and he was the Boston sports guy. And he wrote about, because he's a big Red Sox fan, Celtic fan, Bruins, everything, everything Boston. And I was reading his stuff, and I had emailed him a couple of times, and he kind of helped me in how he set up a blog. Him and Alex Blex, who also writes Bronx Banter, a Yankee fan. Still, Yankee is a great guy. He helped me set up the blog and everything. And when I put in the site meter on the blog, I couldn't believe it when it started clicking. 1, 2, got up to 100, 500. I was like, you gotta be kidding. Somebody's reading this stuff? It's like, I couldn't believe it. And it just gave me, they were really, the only bloggers out there were Red Sox bloggers. And for some reason, the Oakland A's had a lot of bloggers. And then next thing you know, it just, people just started writing blogs and just venting the way I was venting, because let's face it, when you've been rooting for the Mets since 1964, there's a lot to vent about.
Now, Steve, wouldn't you say that, and this is something that I've talked about, and, Max Cerrone mentioned it about Brian Hope and his MetsOnline.net, which is the first message board I used to, I was working at Associated Press and writing on the internet, which drove the Associated Press crazy. But I was always on the message boards, always on, trying to get the temperature of the fan. Do you think, I think the message boards are what, I think Taryn, you mentioned it as well, on the message boards. I think that really lends itself to the explosion of blogging. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I ended up becoming friends with Joe McDonald from New York Sports Day, and that was the mofo, was the Met message board, and that was like...
That was the original Brian Hope site that went and became...
Well, that was like Met's Animal House, the mofo. That was like, I mean, you talk about, everything went on the mofo. I mean, that was... we tore people apart a lot of times, but,
Does anybody know what Steve is talking about? Anybody remember the old mofo? And it was, you're right.
Yeah, and then from there I just started saying, well listen, instead of, going on here and posting, let me just post my own stuff on here. And it seemed to resonate with a lot of people, because I'm not kind of shy when I have my opinions, especially about the Mets, and sometimes my language gets a little salty when I'm writing about it. Yeah, it happens sometimes, and the funny thing is,
I'm very rarely on Twitter though, Steve.
Oh.
You don't curse much on Twitter.
Well, I don't know what the audience is, I don't know.
Right.
Once in a while
I was actually being facetious.
Well, I do get annoyed sometimes. I do get annoyed once in a while. Sometimes it's, usually something you put out there.
It's true, it's very true.
I'm sitting at work and I said, let me take a chance. Let me go on here and, the bagel and the people will fly. I said, oh, it's freaking healing. Jesus Christ.
Let's go back to Matt. And we'll start with Matt, and then we'll work our way down. Because I always think it's important for, even though we're all fans and we all blog and we all get caught up in the day-to-day and who they signed, who didn't they sign, we all started somewhere as fans. Now, for me, it was growing up in Brooklyn, sitting on the stoop in Flatbush, talking with my friends about the Mets. And I would say that most of the guys in my neighborhood were Met fans, but there were some Yankee fans. My dad, who's sitting over there, was a huge Brooklyn Dodger fan. And I grew up at his feet getting those stories. So I guess it was natural. I guess he might have disowned me if I became a Yankee fan. Still doesn't read anything I ever write about the Yankees to this day. But we all started somewhere. Who was that first Met that you rooted for? Who was your first favorite Met?
Probably Darryl. I grew up in Connecticut. I was surrounded by Yankee fans, some Red Sox fans, but no Mets fans. And I met a friend of mine when I was in probably 7th grade or something. He was a Mets fan. And going to his house after school or whatever, and the game was on, and I don't know, Strawberry Connected, he had a poster, I think, whatever it was. And that was it. And I guess, looking back on it, the contrarian sort of move of it, and knowing that all my family was Yankee fans, and the Mets were winning, and I don't know, it just was fun. I kind of just took to that. But I think it was definitely Strawberry. And then, as you get older, I think I respected Keith Hernandez a little bit more just because you learn more about the game. You know, playing first base, I always was interesting. I played a little first base when I was younger. So I think those sort of things start to take shape. But the sizzle and the excitement of Darryl is really what sort of caught me.
My first favorite Met, my eternal favorite Met is Tom Seaver. And if there's ever an applause line to use in a room full of Mets fans, I guess that's it. I became a Mets fan summer of 1969, which I suppose makes me a bit of a front runner. You know, excepting for the 45 intervening years, most of them anyway. You know, I was 6 years old. Mets were just in the air that summer. My father would bring home the Post, and on the back page every day was a cartoon. And there was a bear representing the Cubs, who were in first place, and a duck representing the Mets, who were challenging them from second place. And I found myself rooting hard for the duck every day. I loved turning to the standings. I was just fascinated by numbers. I watched the Mets kind of creep up on the Cubs, and I discovered Channel 9, and I discovered the radio, and Bob Murphy, Ralph Kiner, and Lindsey Nelson, and just the whole thing was something I wanted to be wrapped up in for the rest of my life, and I suppose I have. What about you, Corell?
No question, Dwight Gooden. Definitely, you know, still to this day, probably my all-time favorite Met, just personally. You know, the world would just stop when he would pitch. And it was an event every time he went out there. And, you know, I just remember when I was a kid, my dad bringing me to Shea Stadium to watch the game. So just no question. I love to watch him hit too. When he used to get that up at the plate, I love to watch him hit.
I started rooting for the Mets in 1987, so I was left-handed. I wanted to play first base. Keith Hernandez was cool. But you know, it's funny, kids get into rookies and prospects, and the first rookie prospect that I really liked was, I think someone was wearing a jersey out there, it was Greg Jeffries. I remember Greg Jeffries running out to get the rookie card and thinking he was going to be a batting champion. Now you look at his physical ability, he probably wouldn't get drafted today if Greg Jeffries was around. But one other funny thing, as far as the Mets, like teams, my favorite Mets team, I think, is 1999. Personally, I graduated college. That was a fun summer. That was a fun team, and would like to see some of the series that year. So.
I often say that Dwight Gooden is the reason that I'm a Mets fan. My very first game was in May of 1984. Houston Astros, Mets. Nolan Ryan versus Dwight Gooden. It was one of Dwight Gooden's few losses, but I just fell in love with the team. But it was really Gary Carter hitting the game-winning home run against Neil Allen opening day of 1985 that got me. So it's really a tie between Doc and Gary. But also I have to echo that 1999 was one of my favorite teams. They were real blue collar, just like what it was like to be a Mets fan. That they kept you entertained, and I mean, there was just so many likable people on that team. So more so than the 2002 United for the World Series. That's just my opinion.
I don't even think I have to ask Steve this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Steve, what was your first favorite?
Of course, it's got to be Steady Eddie. Steady Eddie, great cool. I started watching this team back, I said 1964, I was 6 years old. And it was funny because they used to sell these uniforms, and you could get the number and your mother would sew it on, and I had number 7. And we played in the schoolyard. I was at Crane Pool, my friend George was Ron Hunt, and his cousin Frank was Roy McMillan. And we were, 3/4 of the vet infield. And we thought this was the greatest team of all time, this 14. I played first base. I wasn't very fast. I could feel pretty good. And I'd get a hit every now and then to, get a key, which was, and since I was 6, my nickname was Crane throughout the whole day. I grew up in Brooklyn. I don't know if you can tell by my British accent. I grew up in Brooklyn before, real Brooklyn, not this Brooklyn today crap. But, that's fake Brooklyn. I grew up in real Brooklyn.
What do you mean?
Yeah, I'm 30, real Brooklyn. And, Brooklyn was really, like Mark said, there was more Mets fans. Being that Brooklyn Dodgers were, and the Giants morphed into the Mets. But, you know, Kranepool was always the guy, and I'll tell you the second favorite, and I'm going to look out there and see if anybody's as old as I am. Dennis Rybrand, a pitcher for the Mets. And he was when I was a kid, and I thought that he was going to be like the next big pitcher on the Mets. And I think he was there for 1 or 2 seasons, and he got traded to Pittsburgh. But I still have a Sunoco glass that they used to give out with Dennis Rybrand, and I still have it home with me. I have one of him and one of Ron Swoboda, who was supposed to be the next great phenom as well. But Ed Kranepool, and today at 3 o'clock, Ed will be here, and I will be doing a Q&A with him, and the other side over here, and that should be a lot of fun as well.
And a shameless self-plug. Not that anybody cares, but my first favorite Met, 130 pounds ago, I looked like, at least in my mind, I thought I looked like Lee Mazzilli. And I used to wear my wristbands on my forearms, and you know, especially now, I wear contacts now, but when Lee first started to wear glasses, forget about it. For me, that was, I'm a kid from Brooklyn, I play center field, and was that like the Oscar music telling me to wrap it up?
The Golden Globes, the music's playing.
But Mazzilli was my first Met, you know, my first favorite Met. But ultimately, I think, and I don't know about anybody else out here, but the reason I really became, I think, a Met fan was the radio and Bob Murphy. Because, you know, when we were kids, you know, like Mike, we didn't have cable, you know, I mean, I'm old. We didn't have cable, we didn't have, you know, WFAN, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have Twitter. And, you know, my connection to the Mets was Bob Murphy. It was a great day for a ball game, Gary Dolan. I mean, that was my guy, going to sleep, listening to WMCA back in the day, you know, listening to Bob. And I think that all of us would like love having that connection, whether it's Bob Murphy, whether it's Gary Cohen, any of those guys. That's part of, it's not just the players, you know, it's the personalities that surround the team as well. Now, we're going to get ready. Before we end things, I do want to give the audience one more opportunity. If you guys have any questions, please come up to the front, to the microphone. If you have any questions for anybody, I know we're getting ready for Ron Darling. I'm not sure if it's here yet. You have a question? Go right up. Go right up. No. Photoshop, yes. City Field, so we see how it looked with blue walls. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, sometimes they need to see things before they actually commit to it. Anybody else have a question? Ask a question. Come up to the mic so we can see you, Bill. That's right, it's Gil. Named for Gil Hodges, but real name for Gil Hodges.
So, we're about to get into 5 how do you think traditional media views you folks and the organizations, not just the Mets, but all the different organizations, how do you think they view you now and going forward as your presence becomes larger?
Who wants to grab that? Grab it,
Well, I know that the Mets read everything that people write and talk about. They monitor it, especially now in this age of social media with Twitter, Facebook, and everything. And there's sometimes things I've written where I've gotten an email from people in the organization that were kind of questioning what I was saying, and I've gone back and forth with them a few times. And they, you know, they just want to know why you say certain things, and you explain to them why, and you know, they go with it. They've been very good. I mean, they've invited us out to different events, and they
invited you out.
well, yeah, Sandy's invited me out, all right? Yeah, we've all been out there, and we get, you know, they've given us access to the players, and we can, you know, it's helped immensely with what we do, because now, I mean, you can go right to the source, talk to a player, and ask them a question or ask the front office a question that you have, and they're willing to answer. They know that by working with us and what we do, it's helping the team. I mean, I think that the new management that came in under Sandy Olson, I think he realized the passion of Met fans. I don't think he knew this when he first came in. And I think he's embracing the passion of the Met fan. And I mean, the organization is also, what we're doing here today at the QBC, they've also been supportive of this, and they've helped out a lot too. So I think this, the gap is kind of closing between animosity towards, the bloggers and the organization. And it has to also with like the writers. We were looked at as piranhas when we first started. We were the guys down in the basement, doing this. And then all of a sudden the news media decided, wait a minute, these guys are getting a lot of play. We better start doing some blogging too on these newspaper sites, to keep up with them. So.
Well, we're going to wrap things up here, folks. This has been the new media panel for the QBC. I want to thank everybody here on the panel for being here today and coming out. I want to thank you guys for coming out. And enjoy the rest of the QBC. We'll be hanging out and we'll chat later.